these kind of things, and these kind of things are instituted at time of crisis, because the American public is just like 9/11. We'll give up our freedoms, just save us from the terrorists.
Well, this sounds like 2008 when they started talking about recession, and all of a sudden we bailed everybody out and did things that had never been done before because of a crisis.
Yes. You know what's necessary in a free market economy, in a capitalist system, which, by the way, that's what this Bible supports.
I agree.
Is a capitalist system. That's what God says is the right way to do it. In a capitalist system, what happens is these markets correct themselves. So in a free market system, you have to allow companies to go bankrupt, because here's what the market is saying to you. They've not been efficient. They've not controlled their costs. They've not done the right things to get to play in the free market. So they go away. Let me show you something else that happens. When you prop up a company, when you bail out a company in that environment, then it sends wrong signals to the marketplace. Here's one of the interesting things that happens. Let's say for a minute you and I are counterfeiters. We're just going to start counterfeiting $100 bills. Okay? This is what the government does. They're legal counterfeiters. But you and I get put in jail for doing it.
That's right.
Right? But let's say you and I, we're just going to counterfeit $100 bills. Watch what happens. I'm going to go through this quickly, hopefully. The first people, let's say you and I are so good at it we don't get detected, all right? And you and I are the first ones that get that new money. There's no gold to back it up. There's no goods and services been produced to create new wealth. We just created new commodity, money in our hands. So you and I take that money and we go spend it in the economy. Now watch what happens. When you inflate the money supply artificially, which we just did, and you go out and use it in the economy, then what it is, it's too much money chasing too few goods, and prices start going up. Because now you and I are bidding with the people who are out there who normally, let's say it's the baker on the corner. His business has been running, he can kind of control his demand, he knows what his supply is, and you and I come in and just, mess the whole works up. Because now we're bidding up these prices, and so here's what we're really doing. We're stealing the people who are legitimately playing in the free market. We're stealing their money because we're making them pay more high prices for those products, because we're over here bidding them up with counterfeit money. So then what happens is it filters through the system. So the people who benefit most are the people who receive the counterfeit money first. And then it goes to the baker, and it goes to whoever he does business with, and it finally filters out into the economy this way. So everybody in that chain, the first ones get benefit of it, but let's say you're on the back side of that chain. Here's what happens to you. You show up at the baker, and all of a sudden the goods that you usually buy are all of a sudden a lot higher. You hadn't seen any new money. You don't have any new income. You're having to pay the high prices, but you didn't get any benefit of the counterfeited money. This is what happens every day in our system. So in our legal counterfeiting system, here's what's going on. The Federal Reserve prints trillions of dollars. How does it get into the economy? Now, you're going to love this one. Here's how the money gets into the economy. Ben Bernanke and his Federal Reserve chairmen of the 12 Federal Reserve banks of the United States decide who gets special treatment. And they, listen to this, give the money to those banks. They give it to them. It's just like if you and I counterfeited it and we're just going to be benevolent, we're going to be Robin Hoods. We're going to go out here and find people just to give. So here's who gets that money. People have special access and people who are special interest. If you're in a union or and you put the president in office, he's going to, he goes and pays the unions off. This is the way he does it. How do you do it? He bailed out General Motors. And so when the Federal Reserve does this, they put this new money in the system. Now what? Now, what you and I did down here at this level with $100 bills, imagine this with trillions of dollars filtering all through the economy. Now here's the worst of it. In inflation, here's the people who really get hurt. The people who are on fixed incomes and Social Security never see the new money. In an economy where this happens legally, here's what happens. If prices start going up, employers get pressured to raise wages. So you and I might get, this is what happened. You remember in the 70s when inflation was so bad? Sure. Prices would go up. I was getting a raise every 6 months. But what if your grandma sitting home drawing Social Security or fixed retirement income? She never gets the raises. This is why the government finally instituted cost of living raises with Social Security, because people are screaming so loud about it. Inflation, prices are going up. So the American people are completely conditioned to accept inflation. You know what? Here's the government. The government has convinced us that 2 or 3% inflation is okay. Let me tell you what 2 or 3% inflation a year will do to you. If you're saving money and you want to save $1 million by the time you get ready to retire, if you've got 2% inflation for 30 years, that $1 million becomes $500,000 by the time you get to retirement. That's what 2% does. Now tell me what 10% does. In the 70s, those of you that are old enough to remember that, we were up around 18%. Yeah. Inflate 21%.
Well, let me say this. Like when we had this quote-unquote recession, the government was saying if we don't bail out General Motors and all of this, think of the people that will lose their jobs. And so they actually presented this as a compassionate way of dealing with things. Tell us why that wasn't right.
I'll tell you why. It's exactly why that's not right. Because in a free market, if somebody doesn't make a profit and they go out of business like General Motors didn't, okay? Here's why it's so bad. Because, number one, they're having to print the money to bail them out in the first place, so inflation is exacerbated. But here's the worst of it. In a free economy, here's what happens. If you're producing goods and services over here, people make it, a manufacturer makes a decision about how much goods and services he's going to produce by what kind of demand there is out there, all right? So if you're creating false demand by propping up a company, then here's what you're doing. You're misdirecting productivity. That capital that's being used in General Motors to produce a product that can't be sold, the government went over there and made them produce these little electric Volt cars and nobody bought them. See, you can't dictate to the free market what it wants. This is what the Soviet Union tried to do. They're on the ash heap of history.
Well, this is communism. It's
exactly
socialism
what it is.
Is what it is.
So here's what happens. You're misdirecting capital and labor. So General Motors keeps using this labor that's not going to produce what it needs to produce, and the free market, here's what the free market would do. You let that company fail, the free market will absorb all that labor to do the things it needs to do.
But see, a lot of people would just say, but we can't let them fail. But let me say this, and you tell me if it's right. But if you had 100,000 people put out of work by General Motors going under, that would have been bad, and it would have been hard on them. But this affected millions of people by inflating the economy, and there's probably millions of people suffering rather than just a small segment that was in that industry.
Exactly. How much time do we have right now?
We got about 4 minutes.
Let me try this quickly. This will help you understand. I think a little better, help people understand. Let's imagine for a moment that you're marooned on a deserted island, like Robinson Crusoe was. Well, here's what you're faced with, and this will help explain this, believe it or not. But you're faced with all kinds of needs, right? I mean, you got to protect yourself from the weather. You're going to be hungry. You're going to be thirsty. So here's what you do. You start by preparing for your minimal water needs, and then you have to stop doing that and go, take care of your food needs, and then you got to stop doing. So here's what you're up against all the time. You're up against the application of your time and labor to get your needs met.
You have to allocate it.
You have to allocate it correctly. In some places it's called a specialization of labor, but it's called, in economics, it's called the division of labor. So let's say now, let's go to the Swiss Family Robinson. Here they are, but they're a family. So they can practice the division of labor. Here's how they do it. Papa goes and finds the food. Mom cooks the food. The children get the firewood, right? So, but here, watch this. If one of the children's out collecting firewood and he gets enough firewood, he doesn't just there's no reason for him to keep piling wood on the firewood pile. He can go use his labor now in a more productive area, supplying our needs in a different area, okay? And wouldn't it be silly if this child complained, you know what, if my brother would come help me stack firewood, I could stack more firewood. Well, here's what that brother's doing. He's fishing to get us something to eat for tonight. So in other words, in a free market system, here's what happens.
I see what you're saying.
The division of labor, the market dictates where people need to go produce something for our best good as a society.
But when the government gets involved, they prop it up and you become top-heavy over in some area that was non-productive.
Yeah, it's the equivalent of them telling the boy who's doing the fishing, well, go help the kid who's stacking up firewood even though we really don't need it.
So the more government intervention we get, the more it messes up the free market.
Yes. The market is so complex in its because you know what the basis of a free market is everybody acting in their own best interest. That's what the basis of it is. And so in a free market, everybody's acting in their own best interest, and there's just millions of complex, intricate things going on. There's not a man who can sit in Washington, call himself the Federal Reserve Chairman, and have some crystal ball to tell us what the marketplace is going to do. This is why they always miss it. This is why we just had this housing boom and bust, right? This is exactly what happened. Well, I'll explain that some after the break because it'll take some time.
But actually, the government instituted that by their regulations where they started trying to give preference to people who couldn't qualify for loans, and that inflated everything.
Precisely. So what is the government doing? They're messing with what the free market would normally do.
But the compassion, they'll sit there and say, but some people are missing out on a house, and it was because they weren't productive. They didn't have the income. We're going to have to take a break here. We're only a minute away, but let me just say this, that, you know, I sat down with Paul, and Bob Yandian and I sat down about a year ago this time, and he just began to explain some of these things to me, and I tell you, it really impacted me. So I pray that this is helping you too. And like I said, we've spent this first hour basically just trying to describe why we're in the mess we're in and do this. And then we're going to take a break, and we're going to come back. And at the top of the hour, Paul and I'll be back, and we're going to start talking about how we can get out of this, and even though we're in an ungodly system, how that our faith in the Lord can cause us to prosper even during these times. And both of us are doing it, and we believe that we'll share this with you, and it'll make a big difference. So thanks for watching. We have about 2,200 people or so watching right now. We hope you all stay with us. We'll be back after a 10-minute break, and we'll talk about the solution to this. God bless you.
Amen.